Welcome back. I believe this is going to be our last video. So we talked about breaking down material to create sediment, sediment being deposited, deposited sediment turning to sedimentary rock. Now we'll talk about sedimentary structures. Hooray for sedimentary rocks! Why is that, you say? As mentioned, this is a personal thing. There may not be much to look at. Earthy colored, kind of boring, but not that sparkly. But sedimentary rocks do the best job of telling the story of the environment they formed in, including what organisms lived there. Most fossils found on Earth are found in sedimentary rocks. Also in sedimentary rocks, you can form distinctive structure that help geologists recreate the past. So sedimentary rocks tell one good story. They can tell about the organisms that lived in a certain area. They can tell about the environment based on the structures that are embedded into the rocks themselves. So they tell a good story. Some of those structures embedded into sedimentary rocks include things like ripple marks, mud cracks, tracks, cross bedding, graded bedding. Let's talk about it. So ripple marks form in shallow water environments. For example, this is where we'd expect to find ripple marks in sediment. Very edges of lake shores, stream edges, gentle bays of the ocean, you might see these ripple marks in sediment. So when we see these in sedimentary rock, we can think, oh wow, well in the past, this area where this is formed must have been a shallow water environment. So the present is the key to the past. Uniformitarianism, say it with me now, uniformitarianism. What about mud cracks? Again, this is what we see now. Well, what must have it been like in the past? Well, something like this. So mud cracks form in moist areas that dry really, really quickly, typically, like washes, playas, which we talked about in a previous video. Desert, arid regions. So you get some area that's muddy, the water evaporates very quickly in a dry area, so quickly that the soil itself kind of shrinks and cracks, creating these mud cracks. So if I see this structure in a rock now, it's telling me that in the past, oh, it must have been in some muddy area that dried really quickly, kind of like a desert or something like that. The present tells us about the past. Tracks, footprints, all right? So what I see now, so I see these dinosaur footprints in this rock, and I also see, do you see something else, another structure in here? Ripple marks. So what is this telling me? So this organism, feet sunk into the sediment, and then later on the sediment lithified, turned to stone. So what is that telling me? That this area that this dinosaur walked through is probably some sort of muddy area. Maybe something like this, the edge of a stream, the edge of a lake shore, someplace where there's a lot of rain. Again, with the ripple marks, it's probably leading more towards the edge of a stream, edge of a lake. This dinosaur was walking through there. So again, the present tells us about the past. So not only were there dinosaurs here, it was some sort of edge of water environment. You're telling the past just by looking at a rock. That's powerful. Cross bedding. If we look at a rock and see something like this, a bunch of these lines going every which way in this sandstone, well then it must have looked like this in the past. So this is a sand dune, kind of cutting into the side of a sand dune. If you ever do so, you see these layers because sand moves, sand dunes move. As the wind blows, sand dunes kind of shift where they're at. As that's the case, as that sediment builds up and eventually lithifies, that movement of sand dunes is recorded within the sedimentary structure. So this sandstone, these structures, these cross-bedding structures indicate that when this area was forming, when the sediment was deposited, it was an Aeolian, windy, dry environment. So it tells a story. Where is that located? Maybe at beaches on the shore, maybe in the middle of a desert where there's a lot of sand dunes. So the present tells us about the past. And then there's something called graded bedding. This is a kind of trickier one. So when we're looking at graded bedding, this occurs where large amounts of sediment can settle very quickly. So imagine you get a bunch of sediment and it just settles real quickly. we looked at these jars. Do I have my little flashlight? I don't know if this is going to work. We looked at these jars in the previous unit. Might be a little too bright here. There we go. But you can see a bunch of sediment settle. The heavier, the bigger pieces settle at the bottom, and now the lighter pieces settle on top, and the extra light pieces are kind of still in the water. Well, that's kind of what graded bedding is. So a form where large amounts of sediment can settle very quickly. So you get some sort of landslide, whether it's on dry land or maybe a landslide flowing into a lake or a pond. The heavier material is going to settle out real quickly. The lighter material is going to pile up on top. So you can see the bigger, heavier material at the bottom, and the pieces get smaller and smaller and smaller as you get up. So if you see this embedded in a rock, you can figure out, oh, this sedimentary rock must have been in some sort of area where some sort of sediment was deposited very quickly, floods, landslides, that kind of thing. So the present tells you about the past. They tell a good story. With that, my friends, it kind of brings us over in this region of the rock cycle. So this unit, we talked about weathering, the breaking down of material. It's being eroded, transported, sediment being deposited in different locations. It's lithified, compacted, and cemented together to form sedimentary rocks. So we've covered in the past 2 units 2/3 of the rock cycle. As we get into the next unit, we'll cover metamorphic rocks to complete the rock cycle. It doesn't always form this nice perfect circle. Again, I've said this in the past. The rock cycle can go many different ways. It's just when learning about it, typically we go igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic. Just how it's easiest to learn. But that process can go any which way. Before we get out of here, let me give you one last part of the super secret code. It is the number 7. Lucky number 7. Got me? Number 7. So what are some of the big main ideas as it pertains to sediments and sedimentary rocks? Well, weathering and erosion, what's the difference, right? They work together, but they are different processes. Mechanical versus chemical weathering, including the types and factors that go into weathering, so the difference between the two. Talking about each mechanical, we talked about 4 different types. Chemical, we talked about 3 different types. Factors that go into that, climate being the number 1 factor, and how climate might affect weathering. Land versus ocean, depositional environments and features. Also sedimentary rocks and the structures. So just a little bit of everything, pretty much. It's kind of your takeaway, as we get out of this unit. So there you go. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure, and when I see you next time for next unit, we'll wrap up the rock cycle with metamorphic rocks. Until then, I'll see you later.